but I've never seen anything as violent as this. And the ship was moving about violently, and it wasn't far from where Titanic sank, and I thought there was a high risk that we would sink. And I knew that if we would sink, there was no chance of survival because the ocean was cold and it was very remote.
You are listening to a Mina Amso Network podcast. If you're just tuning in, this is Thor Pedersen, a Danish traveler who's been around the world for the last 8 years, traveling by sea or land, not air. Do you miss flying by airplane?
No, I don't miss flying, but a lot of the time I see how much easier it is if you fly. If I'm spending 24 hours in a bus and you could do it maybe in 1 hour with an airplane.
Yeah, and you can catch this interview on YouTube. Go to my YouTube channel, Mina Amso Show, the podcast, and take a look there. We're also on Spotify, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts. You've been to, now you're in New Zealand, and we talked about what you do in each country.
Yeah.
Do you actually do sightseeing stuff, or do you mainly just want to get through a country, pass through it, walk on, and then get to the next border to get to the next country? Or do you actually do sightseeing?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a bit of both. Sometimes it's a country where I've been to before and I've already seen a lot of the sites and I'm not in a hurry to do so. And I just travel through. I just do the project-related things.
Yeah.
Sometimes I have extra time, especially when my wife, she visits, then it becomes a lot more touristy because I cannot just do hardcore project work while she's around, and she'll leave me, she'll get angry. So we have to go to nice restaurants and go for walks and enjoy parks and museums and go to the cinema and watch a movie and this kind of stuff. Sometimes I know that I can get on a ship in, let's say, in 2 weeks, but not before. So then I have 2 weeks and I don't have to spend my time looking for a ship. So I'm freed up and then I have more time to go and explore. I generally explore a little bit locally. So now I've been in Auckland for 3 weeks and people have been reaching out, and some people have been taking me to different interesting sites and nearby interesting places. It could be nature or whatnot.
People you don't know.
Yeah, so this is people I don't know. They reach out and invite me and offer me their kindness and their hospitality.
That's amazing. So they just look at you, like, are they just following you on Instagram and they realize that you're in New Zealand and welcome you here, or how does it work?
Yeah, that's exactly how it works.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so people reach out. Every day people reach out, and there's no way I can keep up with it. The traffic is far more than what I can manage.
Wow.
But once in a while, I can pick a message or respond to someone, and then it leads to often some really nice experiences.
Yeah. And, the people in New Zealand are quite friendly, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. So, you've been to war-torn countries like Iraq and Afghanistan. And,
I've been to all of them.
Kuwait and Lebanon and Syria. You've been to Iraq as well. What do you think about the situation over there?
Yeah, well, that's a big question, isn't it? Well,
a bit of a brief answer would be great.
I think that even in the hardest imaginable conditions, people, they find a way to be human. And when I went to Iraq, people were still, this was at the time.
Happy.
Well, yes, some were.
Somehow happy.
Some were happy, some were not. But people were still interested in things that people were interested in other places in the world. This was when Game of Thrones was still a big thing. They hadn't finished the series. People were waiting for the next season.
Yeah.
And people were talking about Game of Thrones.
In Iraq?
Yeah, absolutely.
Goodness. We've gone far, haven't we?
And I went to a mall and I saw there was a poster that showed what kind of movies were showing. And these were all the same movies that you see everywhere else around the world, you know.
Wow.
So people, they stay human. People, they fall in love, they get married, they take care of their children, they play sports. Countries that love football, they follow football in Europe or in Germany and you know, wherever. When I went to Libya, fidget spinners was a big thing, and you still, even though conditions were hard and there was armed conflict and strife, and children would have fidget spinners. And in Syria, I was in Damascus, and in one part of Damascus, the city was being destroyed. So women are screaming and children are crying and the houses are falling apart. And in another part of the city, people are sitting at cafes and you have flat screen TVs that are showing music videos, and people are drinking tea and taking photos and updating social media. So people, they stay human. And one thing that has been a common theme across all of these countries is that most people try to avoid going to them because they're scared. They fear for their life. They think that maybe they'll end up in armed conflict, or a bomb will fall on their head, or they'll be kidnapped, or something like this. So when you do go to countries like this, you are received by incredible hospitality. And a lot of the time, people, they want to show you that their country is more than what you see on TV. They want to show you that their country is more than the conflict or more than the war. And they invite you inside and they show you culture and the hospitality, and you can be treated like royalty. Quite often. The outmost hospitality in the world has often been in countries that are in strife and conflict and in trouble.
Interesting. And do you find like the Middle Eastern people are more hospitable than other nations?
Yeah, I do think so. And I think there's a misconception, and I think this also is derived from media, that it's all about terrorism and evil and so. But when you go, I mean, hospitality in Denmark cannot compete with hospitality across the Middle East. There's something in the culture where, like, it's a completely different game. It's not the same league at all.
It's so nice to be able to hear about that. So well done, Middle Eastern people. We always love to, actually, we do love to feed people, and we love to, I mean, I say we because I'm Middle Eastern. And we love to feed and take care and making sure that everyone is okay. So expect to be fed when you don't get asked. So that's you know, the standard. So you must have such a perspective on life, because you have been to so many places and you spoke to so many people and you've gone through difficulties and had to solve problems. You have such perspective. Like what are sort of the life lessons that you've learned along the way that perhaps you might even end up writing a book about and sharing it to the world? So what are the life lessons that you've learned?
Well, first of all, I learned that people are just people. It doesn't matter which country you go to. It doesn't matter what the dominant religion is, or the skin color, or language, or history. Everywhere you go, people are people, and they do people stuff. They get stuck in traffic, and they have cookouts, and they love food and music and dancing and sports, and they play video games, and they take selfies, and they upload and manage social media and scroll endlessly through social media and watch YouTube videos and Netflix. And, you know, people go to school, they go to work, and they make a living and they make a life. This is essential to every country in the world. And some people have money and some people have less money, and even people with less money, you know. So if you have enough money to have a proper football and maybe a jersey and proper shoes and this kind of stuff, okay, then you play football. If you don't have that kind of money, you kick a can or you kick something very simple, or a poor quality football. But it's still sports, it's still games, it's still football. So I think that's essential. Something else is that almost everything can be solved, but most of it relies on network. So you need to reach out. And if you cannot find a solution for the problems you have, then you need to expand your network. You need to meet more people. You need to make more connections. And then eventually you'll find someone who can help and assist, or connect you with someone else who can help and assist. So that's something that I've experienced across the world, that the human power is tremendous.
It's really a wonderful life lessons that you've mentioned. Quite nice to hear that, you know, you can't do things by yourself. You can't grow on your own. You can't develop on your own without a community, without a network. I think that really stood out for me as you were talking. So that's nice. So would you live in any of the countries that you've been to?
Yeah, for sure. I've been to a number of countries where I thought would be really nice.
Yeah.
I come from Denmark. I want to go back to Denmark. I see myself and my future in Denmark. But if I couldn't go back to Denmark, I've always been saying that Iceland would be a good alternative. There's something within the culture and the landscape and all this that attracts me. Now I've been in New Zealand for a while. I think New Zealand would be a good substitute country if I cannot return home. Yeah, New Zealand is a wonderful place. I think Japan is really interesting. I enjoyed my years in Hong Kong as well. There are many places around the world. The United States is an interesting country as well. So the United States is so big that you can find happiness somewhere, and you can find whatever you want. You can find mountains and waterfalls and beaches and lakes and desert and forest. And the United States is so big, and it has everything. A lot of the time, what we hear from the United States is school shootings or politics or a bridge that collapses, and we hear the negative things. But this is media.
Yeah.
We hear the negative things a lot. There are 330 or 40 million people in the US that are living their lives.
Yeah.
And for the most part, they're living good lives.
Yeah. And you've been to every state?
No, by far not. The United States is, 50 states?
Yeah.
And I've been to 17, I think.
Oh, okay. Well, that's so good enough.
Yeah.
Very good. I'm sure you've gone through a situation where you thought, I'm going to die.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
It happens. Sometimes it happens.
Sometimes. And it's just casually, like, clip through it and it's okay and you'll be fine.
You try to avoid situations where you think you're going to die. At least I do.
Yeah.
Sometimes it happens. The first time I really thought I was going to die within this project was on board a ship. And I was in the North Atlantic, and we were in a storm, and I've never seen anything like that. It was
a storm before?
Absolutely. I've seen storms before, but I've never seen anything as violent as this. And the ship was moving about violently, and it wasn't far from where Titanic sank, and I thought there was a high risk that we would sink. And I knew that if we would sink, there was no chance of survival because the ocean was cold and it was very remote. But it worked out fine, and we made it across to Canada. So that was the first experience of that. And another...
I understand that the ship is sunk.
Not that one.
Not that one.
No, but there are 3 of the ships that I've traveled on board that sank. So not with me on them, but after I left the ships, they sank.
That's crazy. So how did that happen? So were you on a container ship with like cargo, or were you like with other people, like on a passenger ship?
One of the ships that sank is a catamaran, a sailboat in the Caribbean. It is a family. The captain of the family father, his name is Eric, and the ship's name was Aces 4. And they had me across from one country to the other within the Caribbean, from Trinidad to Grenada. And and then we stayed friends, and we continued to communicate. And then years later, they contacted me and said, we were in a horrible storm, we hit a reef, and our catamaran sank. And we were rescued by helicopter. So I know that one sank. Then there are 2 cargo vessels in Central Africa. One that brought me across from Gabon to Sao Tome. in Central Africa, and then one that brought me from Sao Tome to Cameroon. And one of these, the first one, was not in especially good condition. And eventually it sank. I don't know what the story is. I don't know why it sank, but it did. The other one was in really good condition.
Yeah.
And was just in a storm that it couldn't handle, and it sank.
What was it like to be in a storm and to be tossed around? Were you able to eat, drink? What was it really like on board?
You mean the vessel that where I was scared, and the one up in the North Atlantic near where the Titanic went down? It was chaotic. Anything that wasn't tied down would fly in the air. You couldn't lie in your bed without falling on the floor. You couldn't stand on your feet without holding on to something. You would fall. You couldn't have a shower because the water would not hit you all the time. It would go all around you. It was difficult to eat because if you sat down on the chair would fall on its side. So you sit down and you hold on to the table, but you also have to hold on to your plate, because if you're not holding on to your plate flies away.
What about your food? Can you hold on to your food as well? How do you do this?
Yeah, exactly. So it gets really, really complicated. Small things. Brushing your teeth is difficult.
Wow.
Putting on pants is difficult.
So how do people do this every day?
Well, normally it's not like that. Normally the conditions are not like that. And on top of that, the guys who work on the ships are professional. They find a way. So very simple things get complicated, but then they spend more time and they make it work.
And I understand there's a story where on board one of the ships, people can get a bit loopy and a bit out of their mind, really, due to the conditions. And some people actually go and throw themselves off the ship.
Yes,
So
that
tell
happens.
me what happens.
I've never experienced that. I've only heard the stories of it. If people get proficiently seasick and remain seasick long enough, then they will go a little bit crazy, and then they will think that the better option is to leave the ship or leave the boat. And the only place to go is in the ocean. But then, of course, if you jump in the ocean, then the ship disappears without you, and you're alone in the ocean, and no one will ever find you, and you will most likely drown. So this is this moment of insanity where you make a bad decision and you go, I need to get out of this horrible situation. I cannot be in this horrible situation anymore. The only way I can solve it is jumping out. So this definitely happens.
Yeah. Did it happen? Did you kind of got near to that point?
Yeah, for sure. I was on a sailboat for 4 days from Senegal to Cape Verde. Cape Verde in Western Africa. And I got seasick after 30 minutes and I was on board for 4 days.
Wow.
So I was very seasick, I was very weak, I was very tired, and I kept throwing up and throwing up. And the captain, he got very nervous and he thought about tying me to the boat because he was worried that while he was sleeping, maybe I would jump overboard.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And he tied you down?
No, he didn't. No, and he didn't tie me down, and I managed to stay sane and stay on the boat.
If you're just listening now, we are talking to Thor Pedersen, a Danish traveller who's been around the world by sea and land, not flying, and he will be a historic figure because he's the only person who's done this. He's the only person who, so far, you've only gone by, no one else has done this apart from you. So do check this interview out on YouTube and Apple Podcasts, Google and Spotify, because one day, you're famous already, but one day you'll be even more famous.
I don't think I'm famous at all.
You've got about, you document your work, and you've got an Instagram and Facebook, and you see, you do say that people reach out to you through those means.
Yes.
Do you think if you had done this trip in the 70s, without the internet, without social media, would it have been possible for you to do it?
Yeah, it would have been possible, but it would have been a completely different project. There's an Austrian guy, his name is Sepp, And he traveled for 10 years. So he actually has traveled for longer than what I have. And he went to every country in the world.
Okay.
Sometimes he flew and sometimes he went with buses and trains. So it was a mix of everything. And he did this before social media, and he did this before internet was as common as it is today. So before you could read blogs and do all your research online. So when he was traveling, he would meet people and they would say, you want to know about the border? You want to know about immigration? Then go to the lobby of this hotel.
Oh.
And then you go to a specific hotel and people would meet and have conversations and talk and share their experiences. And then when he went to a border, then everything wouldn't be centralized. So he could negotiate at the border. And if they like him at the border, then maybe they give him a visa and they let him cross. So it was a completely different project for him compared to what I'm doing today. And I sort of look at that with a little bit of envy and think, that was real travel, you know, and it was all based on connections and uncertainty.
Yeah.
Today, if you want to go to every country in the world, you can. More and more people are doing it. The fastest person to go to every country in the world for a long time was a woman.
Oh, wow.
The youngest person to go to every country in the world for a long time was also a woman. And these people who are 20 years old or 21 years old, they've been to every country in the world.
Wow.
But of course, they're flying a lot. And you can find the information in blogs, on websites. There are fixers. In the 80s, there was maybe one person who had gone to every country in the world.
Wow.
By the year 2000, it was about 20 people. And now it's maybe 200, 250 people have been to every country in the world.
But no one has chosen to go by...
Yeah, one guy he chose to try, but he didn't really complete it. He certainly didn't complete it within his own his own essence or his own spirit. If I finish this, I will be the first who has gone to every country completely without flying. But as you mentioned, yes, it will be history. But will it be the kind of history that people will remember and talk about? Or will people see it more like, okay, so he did this and now we move on and let's listen? Because most people know that someone went to the top of Mount Everest. But most people don't know what year it was. Most people don't even know the names of the people who did it. I'm not the first to go to every country in the world. This has been done hundreds of times.
Yeah.
I'm the first to do it completely without flying.
Yeah.
And will people think that's interesting or not? That's on an individual level.
Absolutely. And I think it's very interesting. And I just to sort of wrap up, I just want to know what's sort of your next move when you get back home. What's your next step for you? Yeah,
so I will sleep for 1 month. And then when I wake up, I will shave because my wife doesn't like my beard.
Yeah.
So I shave every time I see my wife.
Yeah.
And I'll see friends, I'll see my family, and I'll find my footing in Denmark. And as you mentioned earlier, a book. Definitely try to share my stories and the learnings and the teachings and the good stuff and the bad stuff. And then I like to do speaking engagements. I've already done speaking engagements around the world where I come to schools or universities and to companies and I talk about the world, I talk about the project and share all of this with people. So I enjoy doing that. I would like to do that professionally as well and have a career as a speaker.
Yeah. Well, all the best to you. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and kia ora. And thank you for tuning in to this week's episode. If you enjoyed it, please let me know. Please share, like, and comment. Go to our YouTube channel and find out more videos and inspiring stories from other people. And we'll see you next week. Thanks so much for listening to this week's episode. If you liked it, would you please share it with a friend? If you enjoyed it so much, would you please leave us a review and a rating on Apple Podcasts? Because that would really help get the message out. Until next week, haere rā.